Hey, you guys, thanks so much for coming over and spending 5 minutes in the Bible with us together. It's really fun to be together on this YouTube channel, and I love hearing from y'all. So feel free to reach out as well. We'll put some contact information in the comments. So we're in First John, and if you were reading along, we went over First John 1 and a little bit of an introduction to the letter last time. And today we're talking about First John 2. And this letter is so interesting to me because you can get kind of hung up as you go, because John uses two things. He uses really affectionate language for the people that he's writing to. He says, my dear friends, my dear brothers and sisters. He uses these like sweet, like he's the grandpa of the New Testament talking down to the next generation who is trying to live out their faith. But at the same time, he also uses really strong language. And he says, like, if you love God but hate your brother, you don't love God. And if you are in the light, you can't like the darkness. And if you are in Christ, then you can't sin. And that's confusing to those of us who are living an everyday life and realize that we have light and darkness in us, and that we do sin, and that we do have times where we don't love our neighbor or our brother very well. So that can be confusing, but I want you to know that what John is using here is he's trying to bring us to a deeper place of kind of in your heart of hearts. Like the question about this comments is about in your heart of hearts. In your heart of hearts, are you set against people? If you really love God, then you can't hate people in this way. And the hate that we're talking about in First John 2 is the kind of hate that says, you have no worth and you have no dignity. You're basically dead to me. And honestly, that level of animosity toward people is a very different thing than when we're talking about struggling with a relationship or being hurt by a relationship. Or even being really wounded by a relationship. The setting of your heart of hearts that says you are dead to me is what John's talking about here. So what John's saying is that when Christ gets a hold of your life, in your heart of hearts, there's an essential change to your like heart DNA that changes the way that you live in the world. That's the kind of change that we experience in Christ. So when he says, in 1 John 2, verse 15, do not love the world or anything in the world. The world he's talking about is not the created world, the world that God created, the beauty and the majesty of the world. He's not talking about the world meaning people of the world. He's using the term world to describe the world of sin, the world that we live in that is actually set against God, that there is a whole line of thinking and a whole realm that's completely set against God's ways. I was reading a magazine at the gym this week, and I won't tell you what magazine it was, but it was not very edifying. And I was on the bike, and I'm reading this article, and it was an article about like casual sex. Multiple things in the article were actually speaking directly against God's way of what he's created for us as human beings on the way that we love each other. Things that I have come to realize are the way that we live in healthy, full, peaceful lives. And this article was basically holding those ideas in contempt, complete contempt. Like the whole idea that you would need to be monogamous is ridiculous and casual sex is the way to go, and all of these things written to women. And I'm thinking this is an example of what John is talking about. When he says don't love the world or anything in the world, he's talking about that kind of thinking and that mentality. Now, do I hate the person who wrote the article? No, it's not saying that. But to live in this world and act like we're all kind of loving and we're all kind of good and we're all kind of going in the same direction is just naive. It's just not real. It would be foolish to not look deeply and think there are things in this world that are directly set against God's design for life. And I need to have in my heart of hearts a setting that says I do not want those things. Sure, are there things that may temporarily feel good in those ways? Absolutely. Sin feels good, but it doesn't feel good for long. That's the difference between sin and love. Love takes work, but it lasts and it creates fruit. And 1 John is really pointing us to say, hey, there's a difference in your heart of hearts. What is the setting of your heart? If you are in Christ, the setting of your heart is going to be to love people. If you are in Christ, the setting of your heart is going to be against this whole system of the world that is set against God. And what John is saying is that your whole life has to be integrated. Your heart life, it's all the things we've been talking about on this channel. If you're in God, you're going to find that your spiritual life, your relational life, your emotional life, are going to come in line. And that's what real health looks like.